Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and oh my god, it's finally happening. The most requested MMORPG for me to look at for ages has been Final Fantasy XIV, and now it's finally getting its video. Today, however, I aim to answer a specific question and provide useful and interesting information about this game. Most importantly though, should you play Final Fantasy XIV in 2021? Now to begin with, I want to make note of an important fact. This is a massive MMO with multiple expansions already out there. A huge story that has several sections to it, set in a historic world that is Final Fantasy. I could make many videos about this game, and over the last week and a bit, I've logged about 40 hours playing the game just for this one video. I am currently finishing off Realm Reborn, the game's first main arc. My aim in this video is to help new players like myself, and potentially returning players, answer that question, is this game worth their time? So this video will be focused on that new player experience, that first major arc that is a Realm Reborn, but also the important overhauls and improvements the game has seen since its release. If you want a TLDR, if this game's worth playing, yes, definitely, it's well worth playing. It gets really good, eventually. So super short, this game has a very bad start, but is worth committing to. It's available on both PC and PlayStation consoles, functionally amazing with its cross-platform between the two. The player base is massive, and you can try the game for free. That free-to-play model has its awkward parts, like not being able to join a guild, but functionally you can play the game all the way through the original and first expansion without paying a penny. While paying subs, pay a monthly fee, and purchase the other expansions where relevant to them, up to a current max level of 80. If you're watching near enough to the release date of this video, right now the upcoming major expansion Endwalker has recently been announced and is coming later in this year with a beta on the horizon. Prior to that, the game has had multiple main stages of the world and story for you to experience, starting with a Realm Reborn and then expanding into Heavensward, Stormblood and Shadowbringers, which were released roughly 2 years apart each time, with major free patches to the game every 3 months. Importantly for you returning players, during Shadowbringers, the original section of the game, A Realm Reborn, has been streamlined to be a better leveling and story experience. And let me tell you, it is much better than what it used to be. Newly transformed into something way better, but still pretty slow and pretty awkward and not that greatly paced. But it is better than what it was, as I've been told countless times by the people I'm playing with. What's fascinating about the history of this MMORPG is how it was actually so horrifically bad at its original launch in 2010, so universally disliked that it was an incredibly expensive failure for Square Enix. So bad officially they said that the initial launch had greatly damaged the Final Fantasy brand. Wow, yet I'm saying the game is good right now. Well, you see, that comes from the fact that they made the expensive decision to instate a new lead director who chose to essentially destroy the original game and then remake and rework what this game was from the ground up, even with a new engine, removing most everything the original game even had. It ended with a massive in-game event, a pre-rendered cinematic, and big story progression for the world. It was a super risky choice in cost and development, in how they literally stopped players from playing the game to do this for a period. But it worked. The game is a massive success today, and genuinely, I believe it redeemed itself. Now, with all that context given, let's talk about the game itself and how it stands in 2021 for a new or perhaps returning player. We'll start with the classes. Final Fantasy XIV currently has a big roster to choose between. Called jobs in this universe, you're able to swap from one job to another at any time on just one character by swapping your weapon. As long as you've done the required unlock for that class or job, you're good to go, which is really important in this MMO because the story is extremely lengthy, meaning ults aren't really a good idea. Letting us play any class via any one character really matters here. Those jobs are unlocked at various levels. They're basically advanced versions of those early classes. Like my Lancer that I picked is the starter class, which then evolves into a job, the Dragoon. The limiter to the jobs is tied to level and also the content you have available. To start with, you get 8 classes to choose between, and then by leveling up, you unlock more options with the jobs. In many cases, you will unlock classes shortly after you're in game, and then the full advanced version, the job, is unlocked at level 30 or higher. So don't let this short list when you're originally making your character deceive you. In total at this time, we can access up to 18 jobs on one character once everything is unlocked via levels and content. At level 50, you unlock a bunch more, some of which we'll get because everyone has access to the first and second stages of the game by default, aka A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, while others require Stormblood and Shadowbringer expansions to unlock them. Ultimately, you'll pick one of those 8 starting classes, unlock the others, reroll whenever you want, or progress your class into its job and just keep going from there. Each class has its own unique class quest to follow into its job and then the following job quests. These are fun storylines to follow, and they give the players a good way to understand the role and feel of that job, sending you out on missions to work with others of your job, getting into interesting situations along the way. In my case with the Lancer, who ultimately becomes a Dragoon, had to deal with an internal conflict in the Lancers Guild, with a rogue Lancer type who thought his way was a bit better. While the Dragoon story, well, they're literally hunting dragons, and they also have that incredible armor that you earn through the class quest and your efforts, ultimately peaking at a duel with another Dragoon. Now, as far as the races go in this game, we have 8 options total. 6 have male and female choices with sub-races to swap between. These sub-races are usually different presets for that race, like how the Aura have different shaped horns and colored scales. The males and females often look radically different with every race. You'll notice the 2 at the bottom, Hrothgar and Viera, are actually grayed out for me. That's because those 2 races come with the most recent expansion, Shadowbringers, which I don't quite have yet, since I'm not even level 70, I'm barely 50. In any case, we have the human types called Haya, elven types called the Elezen, the both wholesome and somewhat disturbing Lalafell, aka potato people, the Mikote, which are basically cat people, oh god, the Rogadon, which are absolute meatheads of this world, the Aura, which are huge dragon people, if you're male anyway. The females are tiny compared to them. Then we have the Hrothgar, which are gender-locked males actually, similar to the cat boys, but a little bit more lion-like and built. And finally, the Viera, which are basically very tall bunny girls. They really know what they were doing when they designed these races, didn't they? Now then, let's move into the combat, which is both fantastic and awful depending on where you are in the game. The thing is, it becomes progressively incredible, but it has a horrifically slow start. To begin with, all of your abilities are on an incredibly long global cooldown, roughly 2.5 seconds between each cast. This is a major issue for many, because compared to other MMOs where you're able to use an ability every 1 second, or even less if you're playing like an Eastern MMO where you spam them out constantly. This is done intentionally, however, and actually works well when you understand more about this combat system. See, eventually you unlock abilities that combo off one another, requiring specific abilities to be used beforehand, chaining correctly into more powerful buffs or extreme damage. On top of that, you'll find many abilities are entirely off that global cooldown, ignoring it entirely, which certainly speeds up the pace, using one ability in between the cooldown of another, like say my Dragoon jumps. There's also self buffs, AoE auras, status effects, CC, and more, many of which are off that global cooldown, many comboed from another ability. When this game gets going, it really gets going. Plus, we also have the limit breaker abilities in group environments like dungeons, powering up a bar at the top as we continue to fight. Then, ideally as a DPS, you unleash a powerhouse of an ability to deal incredible damage and do this amazing animation. I absolutely love these. As a Dragoon, I can pre-buff up my damage in multiple ways to only ever increase the power of that massive hit. Once you use it once, it stacks even higher, going to a 2nd level and then a 3rd level, but I imagine that's only possible in very long fights, like maybe in raiding. Overall though, I love the feeling of the combat, the animations, the pace steadily improving as you go, feels really good. The issue is how staggered and slow that progression actually is. Those long stretches of levels between acquiring new abilities means you're stuck in that terrible, slow, and pretty unrealized pace in the early game. That could be very off-putting. I could easily see someone playing for a few hours, not really knowing that it gets better, being underwhelmed and giving up. Because that's just it. You have to grind through a pretty shitty period where there's not much going on, with the promise that it will get better as you go. I was held over because I was playing with friends and people in my community, talking about what's coming, not really worrying about how little I actually had in the early levels. I reckon that's going to be a bad problem for the game, and for new players, it's just too slow. I think it's very important that at some stage the devs do revisit this, and even half the time that it takes to get your at least first 8 abilities. Right now, it's too slow, it's a terrible pace. Speaking of leveling though, there's a lot I could say about it. Just like the combat, it has incredible highs and also incredible lows. With that new update since Shadowbringers, the leveling pace through the Realm Reborn is pretty fantastic. You can entirely ignore side quests, which are pretty dull, and then just focus on the main quests and class quests, which are way more interesting. hitting up the dungeons whenever you need to for the main quest. Plus, the leveling itself is pretty solid. Instead of doing generic kill X enemy quests, we have a lot of interesting minigames, discussions, correct answers, disguise quests, and so on. The major drawback is the incredibly slow pace at which you unlock those abilities and improve the combat. As I've said, it's pretty boring at the beginning. Since this is a Final Fantasy game, the story is of course a major part of this leveling experience, which, just like everything in this game, gets better as you go. Once things actually happen, instead of just dealing with a pile of foreshadowing and setting up the world for your character, it's an absolute wall of cutscenes and dialogue to get through when you begin before anything really gets happening. It's interesting because I think you could actually go back and fix the leveling when it comes to combat and how quick you get abilities, but I think it's hard for them to fix the story issues. They'd need to remove parts of the story, which isn't really a good idea. It's like they'd need to go back and rewrite all of Realm Reborn, which is asking way too much, I think. That's unfortunate because it is a bit too much for a new player, especially at the beginning, unless you absolutely love Final Fantasy. My first hour of gameplay was just watching in-game cutscenes and reading dialogue for over an hour. The leveling does come with a nice break every 5 levels to do a class quest though, which I said are engaging and fun, getting you more into your class and the vibe of it, and unlocking new abilities that mean more because you actually had to complete a storyline to unlock them, and so it means more to you. Throughout leveling, there's also special solo instances that provide interesting challenges, progressing the story. One issue with this leveling though is how it kind of begins to follow a formula. Go talk to various NPCs over and over, then do a few simple tasks, do a solo instance event, talk to a few more NPCs, then go do the dungeon, which is required to continue the main quest. Then you repeat this exact process at least 10 times as you level through Realm Reborn. It becomes less problematic though because the dungeons and those instances are a bit of a highlight, getting more fun and more complicated as you go. More challenging bosses with real mechanics to actually pay attention to or you'll die. Those starting dungeons are pretty generic and boring, but they really have you paying attention at the higher levels, and I can only imagine it gets better in the expansions. The absolute peak of this has to be those trials you do at 3 major points in the story. You go and fight huge elemental gods with a party. These are from major Final Fantasy lore, and these encounters are just that. You spawn in and face off against a boss with really intense mechanics compared to what you're normally doing in dungeons at that time. Lots of telegraphed attacks, important positioning, target swapping, and survival skills are needed. I loved these. They felt like a tiny, low-level taste of what raiding might be with a lot of mechanics to think about. The more they throw these at you in dungeons and trials, the better it has been for me. A real highlight for the leveling. Now, just to say it, this is a Holy Trinity game. You have DPS, a healer, a tank. However, you do dungeon content in a smaller group as a 4-man instead of a 5-man. And those raid teams are set in 8-mans as far as I'm aware. So it's different, smaller numbers, which actually appeals to me because it'll be easier to actually set up. There's other details about leveling like the hunt journal in which you hunt specific enemies for bonus XP, or the fates which work as public events, completing specific tasks when they're available for XP and currency rewards. All this content throughout leveling can be scaled down if you over level it, like the dungeons or fates, so everyone can play together even if you're a bit too strong for that content. Now, moving on, a quick talk about PvP. This is unlocked through your Grand Company, something that you unlock around level 30 after a short quest line. At the time, there seems to be 2 main options, the Wolves Den and Frontline. Both take place in a PvP instance. The Den is essentially your 4v4 arena type, and then the bigger battlegrounds are the more casual natured frontlines. In PvP, you're given set stats and attributes to try to balance the experience for everyone, and furthermore, they also give you a limited set of actions and traits that you are exclusively able to use in PvP. Because of that, you will see your hotbar suddenly change from what you had to your PvP hotbar, which is certainly weird to suddenly adjust to. Visually, the animations on your PvP abilities for every class are incredible, but I have to imagine these just are the same animations you unlock later in future expansions and higher levels. The self-healing in PvP is nuts. Everyone has an incredible amount. The healers, even more so. It feels flashy, but a bit shallow. The queue times were broken. This does not seem popular in this game. I managed to grab a group of 4 friends to attempt PvP so we could even try and get a game. With a full group, we could not get a front lines match, and with a full group for arena, we still couldn't get an arena match. So for this footage, I just dueled, fighting each other and having a good time with that. Like I said, the animations are amazing, but it didn't feel like there were many good options for CC or counter healing. Maybe at higher levels this will become mechanically better, and I really did like the Dragoon PvP abilities. Moving on then, let's talk about the story, because this is a Final Fantasy game, we need to talk about it. So the story in Realm Reborn, without spoilers, is essentially your slow rise to power and hero status. You're a bit of a chosen one, you're going around the world gathering these crystals and amassing power. There's actually some good twists and turns with the characters and the plot, and I found myself, somehow, against all odds, pretty interested by it. You just need to know when to skip useless cutscenes and pay attention to relevant dialogue at the right time and watch the right cinematics. The general opinion of the story is that it's very good, and each main expansion has a new story to tell, steadily added with 3 patches until it's completed. Friends I've been playing with just keep telling me how good the story gets in future expansions, and now I'm unlocking that and actually beginning that. I'm quite excited to find out. Another important topic for Final Fantasy XIV has to be professions, because hey, in this game, they actually matter, they actually do something. For example, my best set while I was leveling came from my friend Elendriel, a mod and friend who's been playing the game with us, and she made me a full set that held up from levels 23 to 45 over dungeon gear, over story equipment. It looked way better than anything I would have got from the actual world, and that's a big deal to me. Now, at the time of recording this, there's 8 crafting classes, because yes, it isn't some skill you technically have but no visual reference, but it actually changes your class to that of the crafter. You will suddenly have specific abilities tied to it. So not only does it actually matter because it has purpose that's relevant, but it functions totally different to many other MMOs as its own unique class. You've got alchemists, armorers, blacksmiths, carpenters, culinarians, goldsmiths, leatherworkers, and finally weavers to choose between for your crafting, all fueled by gathering professions, which are a bit more generic, where you go mine ore nodes or pick up flowers, the usual, but you do still get some cool abilities like the ability to sneak behind enemies to mine nodes. What's nice is, just like the main classes for the game, you're able to level all of these professions. You're not limited to say 2 like other MMOs, you can do them all whenever you want to. And crafting seems like a great way to make money, or even craft materia, which are essentially gems that go into your equipment to make them stronger, so very relevant in the later levels and endgame. Okay, next up, a quick word on the visuals and exploration of the game. The world is divided by areas that you travel through, all connected through these aether crystals, which work as your fast travel points after you attune to them the first time in person. So it's super easy to explore the world, pick up some crystals, and teleport all over the place at massive distances super quickly. The world itself looks great, from its green, luscious forests, the icy hills, the rolling deserts, or maybe a military area when you're in the main enemies area. There's tons of variety here. Sunny shores, bright jungles. The list really does go on. They packed a lot into this world with a big variety of environments, from bright and pretty to dark and creepy. And it's been great exploring the world and just looking around. The cities are so fantastically designed. The best one for me being Limsa, which is a port city made from this clear white rock. I think the game is visually wonderful. The characters, the armor pieces, it's all brilliant. The unique Final Fantasy feel to the Dragoon armor, or the hilarious little potato person in full plate like my friend Lima here. However, I have to knock one part of it. I think the UI for this game is horrific. It's grey, it's dull, there's a lot going on. That can be changed and modified to something more useful or appealing to you, but it's still minimal in what you can do. It's still an Eastern style of UI, a bit overfilled and a bit bland to look at. And finally, my last topic that I want to talk about, the population for the game. This game is very populated. Every single time I've tried to play this game, I had to go for a short queue. To this day, in 2021, I have to queue to play the game. That says a lot. Any time of the day, I could go into a city or a populated place and see tons of people doing weird things together. I've seen RPers actively RPing in pretty much every inn I've been in. I've seen live shows with bards playing music that is genuinely fantastic. I've seen people standing in a weird line facing off against each other. One side completely naked, one side completely clothed. It's wild and it's so fun to see. Every time I go to any town, any city, I'm always going to see a lot of people and some weird stuff going on. Even then, out in the world, I had no issue finding people people to help me fight big enemies for, say, a fate, or maybe they're stealing my mobs. This is a life-filled MMO. It feels genuinely, massively multiplayer, and that is great. So, in conclusion, I've been talking a while. Should you play Final Fantasy XIV in 2021? Absolutely yes. If you can stick through the slow start, the slow combat, the slow world building, the slow foreshadowing, to see it through to the incredible combat, the fantastic and varied world, and that interesting and steadily more and more engaging story. If you're hoping to jump in and have a ton of fun right from the beginning, well, you might be in for a bit of a surprise, because this game makes you earn it. But once it does get going, it really does get going, I promise you, it is worth it. As a game with a solid free-to-play option, all the way up into that first expansion, and then hey, you also get to play that first expansion. That is pretty incredible and high value, so well worth trying for nothing. It just has a bit of a barrier for new players to overcome, but once you're aware of that, accept it, get through it, you're in for a treat. As I go on to explore more of the game, now I'm over level 50, and continue to go beyond into following expansions, I hope to try big group raiding and see just how good that story is as well after all the hype has been built up for it. I'd love to be able to come back and make another video about this sometime in the future if this video does well enough. So please, if you enjoyed this, hit like, it really helps. A special shout out and thank you as well to my friends and free company. I've been playing with viewers who helped me form a guild and join me for dungeons, for PvP, for open world content. I've been helped with tons of useful advice and perspective. I've had a lot of fun conversations, and I've been able to share a new MMO together with other people, which has been really fun. If you're interested, I'm playing on the Chaos Omega server on EU. The free company is called the Bad Buns in honor of my rabbit Smudge, and we're welcome to others who might want to join. You could message me in game sometime. I'm called Generation Hollow as always, but that's everything I've got. Let me know what you thought of this video and Final Fantasy itself in the comments. I'm looking forward to it. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.